The Odyssey has become an exhausting conversation to have because it tends to be one of those things that brings out the worst in everyone imaginable. But Christopher Nolan's epic has been used as a bludgeoning tool as well to attack a very specific kind of audience and content creator. That being the YouTubers who make content that Hollywood swears doesn't affect their bottom line when it really does. People like Critical Drinker, Nerdrotic, Disparu, and more. These people are evil content creators. Oh, they're the worst, aren't they? Well, not really. They're actually nice people, but nope, they speak mean about movies and share their opinions online, and well, we can't have that, can we? So let's dive into why people like this are apparently the devil, how other content creators are going insane because they want the audience that Critical Drinker has, and how even the scholar this work is based on kind of hates the movie, and I can't use Odyssey footage in this video, otherwise I'll get copyrighted, so video game footage it is, I'm sorry, but that's how it is. As seen here from Vanity Fair, the Odyssey's epic box office haul breaks the go woke, go broke myth. Even the subheadline is incredible. Christopher Nolan's film is on track to bring in over $257 million, once again proving flops like Ghostbusters and The Little Mermaid weren't due to politics and people will pay for a great yarn. Well, that's not true, is it? Ghostbusters 2016 was abysmal. It absolutely flopped because it was taking a male-dominated property and turning it female. The Little Mermaid failed because Disney at the time especially was pushing the ideology angle so hard that everybody got tired of it. The only reason the Odyssey did well is simple, because it's Christopher Nolan. I never even said in any of my videos on the Odyssey, and you can quote me on that, where I say even once this movie would flop. I knew that it wouldn't. That's why I never said that myself either. It's Nolan. People will watch anything this guy makes, and I understand because there's not that many auteur directors anymore. That being said, I still wouldn't pay to see the Odyssey either way. To be fair, I haven't liked quite a few of Nolan's previous films either. I don't hate Dunkirk or Oppenheimer, I just wasn't too thrilled by them either. Like, I can confidently say, yeah, what I'm seeing on screen is made well, it looks good, it sounds great, all of that and more. But I can also say it just isn't for me either, you know? Doesn't mean it's a bad movie, but with the Odyssey, it feels far more malicious. Because the story was warped into this, what I can only call modern audience way of telling a story like this, to the point where the story feels like it was actually lost in translation. Of course, this is all the Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic's fault. Either way, because, well, we have to blame someone, apparently, even though both of these guys are not to blame for anything to do with this movie. That is, if you have any semblance of a brain between your ears, you would know that. You had people like this guy here who said the Odyssey has defeated Critical Drinker, and that's why he hasn't posted a review of the movie yet. And this somehow is a big celebratory win against Drinker somehow, but the comments were equally as tone deaf, ranging from, yeah, we beat Drinker, to, yeah, he's just a chud, am I right, Reddit? In reality, if you just used 1 ounce of your so-called high IQ over there, you could easily just go to Drinker's YouTube page and publicly search his post as seen here, and realize that Drinker was at a convention in the United States for about a week, so naturally, because he was away, obviously, he wasn't making content. So expecting him to write a review for a movie when he was traveling or he just didn't have the time to do it makes sense. I'm sure Drinker will see Odyssey soon enough and then do his review for it. But claiming this is some sort of gotcha makes no sense to me. People have things to do. It's not unrealistic that that was the case. Drinker even retweeted the other guy who thought he had a gotcha, confirming as seen here that, yeah, he was in South Carolina. So your claim with no evidence that he didn't have a review for the Odyssey, that makes even less sense now. I don't get why people embarrass themselves like this, to be real with you, when the evidence is so openly in front of them that it should be simple enough to check why things are happening. Even Nerdrotic, who posted his review as seen here, called the Odyssey an epic disappointment, and then this user retweeted his review saying this: yes, the review is exactly as bad as you'd expect from Nerdrotic. Nothing but grift, deliberate misunderstandings, and total idiocy on his part. Nothing new for him. Should have waited for Critical Drinker to unfreeze so he could parrot him like he usually does. The lack of quality when he doesn't do that really shows. First of all, hilarious that you think this is some sort of gotcha, considering you confirmed that you watched Nerdrotic's review, so you helped his channel out, by the way, really giving it to the guy you hate there, by the way, too. Secondly, I saw Nerdrotic's review, I watched it, and nothing you said explains anything he said in his review either. Nerdrotic called the movie a misunderstanding and a modern audience version of something that doesn't do the story justice. He called it, and I quote, like an atheist trying to tell a story about the Bible, pretty much. And I think that's an adequate way to explain the movie pretty well, because the movie doesn't do anything but LARP as a Greek mythology tale with zero Greeks in it. For example, obviously I can't show any clips of this movie due to copyright, because Hollywood sucks that way, but in the movie there's a part where an old Greek man speaking fluent Greek is sitting on a beach. Then Odysseus' right-hand man, who's an Indian guy, kneels down in perfect English with a Western accent and tells the old guy who's speaking Greek that they're Greeks from Ithaca. And it's like the most baffling thing, because what do you mean this Indian guy speaking English with zero Greek mannerisms is a Greek? As he tells tells this to the native Greek guy in front of him who's actually speaking Greek. It's awful, not to mention that Nolan completely ruins scenes like the Cyclops and the infamous nobody part. Scylla looks awful in this version too. It's like a bunch of gray worms with no faces. I don't know what Nolan was thinking, honestly. He doesn't even show the sirens either. The hilarious part of this all is that apparently the critical drinker, nerdrotic, you name it, are grifters who seemingly don't understand the Odyssey, except you know who also didn't like the Odyssey? Actually, it was Emily Wilson of all people. So, in case you don't know, Emily Wilson is the modern scholar lady who translated the Odyssey into its most modernized version yet. It's also the translation that Christopher Nolan specifically said that he would be using as the basis of his movie in the first place. And Emily Wilson is a feminist, by the way, full-blown, all the usual nonsense, and she saw the Odyssey and, well, she didn't like it either. As ABC News reported here, Emily Wilson actually found Nolan's version both gratifying and unsatisfying, and did not find the film to be Greek at all, as Emily Wilson told the Associated Press. I want to celebrate the fact that so many people are aware of the Odyssey and were brought back to the poem, but at the same time, I had the sense that Christopher Nolan was trying to pack everything in while missing themes that were essential to the poem. Wow, what a chud this Emily lady is, right? Am I doing that right? She didn't like how Nolan did the movie, so that tracks, I guess. This also means that she's just as bad as the critical drinker or nerdrotic, by the way. I'm just trying to make sure I place this take somewhere in the space where these sorts of people think that it should be, of course, right? Even Scott Mendelson, he's a film critic and author, who actually openly defended Nolan's choice to cast Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy, found Nolan's version of Odysseus to be bad, as it said here. But Scott Mendelson faulted the director for giving us an Odysseus with no cleverness, no humor, no wily charm. One of the Western's canon-formative tricksters has been transformed, he contended, into the kind of haunted protagonist featured in such previous Nolan movies as Oppenheimer and Memento. Yeah, because the main character is about as much Odysseus as I am the president of Nigeria, which is not much. But I guess it's the same character as long as you keep calling him Odysseus, at least until you believe it. Emily Wilson, the scholar, had more to say on ABC News, as it puts it here. Wilson, a professor of classical studies at the University of Pennsylvania, said she didn't want to come across as a snobby, nitpicking expert at odds with any deviation from the original text, but she questioned a range of omissions and other choices. From the absence on screen of the gods Zeus and Poseidon, Athena's played by Zendaya, to the incoherent messaging that condemns both war and physical cowardice. She found Penelope's role so thinned out that it endangered any possibility of believing in this marriage. Wilson also thought parts of the movie, notably the scenes with Odysseus's dog Argos, catered towards modern sentimentality. You know how pandering and modernizing your movie has to be for this woman, of all people, to look at your movie and go, wow, this is too feminized even for me. Yeah, that's a problem. Zeus and Poseidon not being in the movies, not really surprising at all to me, since Nolan sort of treats the gods in the Odyssey in a very similar fashion to sort of how Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer treated Galactus all those years ago, where they made the planet-eating giant into a storm cloud instead. Zendaya as Athena, at least, is explained in context, because in the Odyssey, I mean the original, not the film, it's detailed how gods take the forms of mortals to walk amongst mankind. This is all over Greek mythology. Anyway, in the movie version, the reason why Athena looks like Zendaya is because Zendaya's character is actually some random priestess or civilian that Odysseus sees gets beheaded in the movie, right, during the fall of Troy. So Athena then takes the form of Zendaya's character, who's technically deceased in this world now, as to sort of haunt Odysseus about his failure with Troy, to look him in the eyes through a woman whose life ended because of his actions that he and his men carried out. I'm not gonna lie, that's probably one of the only changes in this version of the Odyssey where I went, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, I guess. It's a very Nolan-like thing to do. So Athena doesn't actually look like Zendaya in the movie then, because, well, like all the gods, you don't actually see Athena's true form either. But beyond that one example where context clearly matters, the vast majority of this movie's, I guess, underlying symbolisms, they feel lost compared to the original work's intended points. For example, Nolan said in an interview, and I'm sorry that I can't show footage of these interviews or anything because every freaking website now just copyrights you if you use their footage. It's so annoying, dude. But anyways, Nolan was interviewed in a clip as seen here on screen where he said that, as this fan account recites, Nolan believes that the Odyssey is about the idea that a society can only function through respect for strangers. And he believes that this is the basis of what the Odyssey is all about. But all this really tells me is that Nolan either didn't really read the Odyssey himself, or he just flat out interpreted it in a way that doesn't adhere to the actual story being told, and that he's just, for lack of a better term, modern audiencing it all pretty much. As this comment on the post said, the Odyssey is about strangers abroad and at home relentlessly trying to end Odysseus and take what's his. I mean, yes, because obviously in the Odyssey, as both the story and the movie too, a large part of it is that these suitors back in Ithaca are trying to court Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, to become her husband so they can now rule Ithaca instead, since Odysseus has, been missing for years now since Troy. And Odysseus, in both the story and Nolan's version, returns home, and what does he end up doing? Oh right, he mercilessly starts slaughtering the suitors with his bow and arrow, proving that Nolan in fact did not understand the fundamentals of the very story that he was adapting. Because he literally unironically had Matt Damon with a bow and arrow taking out dudes in front of his wife, who were clearly there trying to usurp him and take control of Ithaca from him. That doesn't sound like the message is society can only function with kindness to strangers to me. It sounds more like you're allowing your lands to be overrun with people you don't know, and eventually they're going to try to dethrone you and take over your home and steal even your wives, is what it sounds like to me, and that the only course of action is no mercy in the eyes of those who seek to ruin you. But no, I guess that isn't modern audience enough for today's film goers, so instead it's love thy neighbor and hope the actual message just flies over their heads like Odysseus's arrows. Not to mention how Nolan somehow forgets the entire point of the Cyclops. I brought up the nobody thing already, but in case you don't know, there's a really famous part in the story, because Odysseus tells the Cyclops that his name is Nobody. So when the Cyclops is asked for his name, he would say he is nobody. But Odysseus becomes vain, obviously, after defeating the Cyclops. And he ends up causing the downfall of his men when he tells the Cyclops his true name. He's like, I'm Odysseus. And then the Cyclops tells Poseidon to curse Odysseus because the Cyclops is a son of Poseidon, and then Poseidon curses him. And that causes a lot of bad things to happen, obviously. But that doesn't actually happen in the movie, because again, Nolan forgets what the work he's doing is about, apparently. Again, blaming any of this on Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic for the backlash is wild. Like, the backlash is global. I knew the movie would do well because casual film-going audiences like Nolan movies, but it doesn't mean that we need to sit here and act stupid and pretend that this movie is somehow a good adaptation, when even Emily Wilson, of all people, flat out said it wasn't either. The fact that Nolan took the Odyssey and hollowed out its meaning out to convey it as some sort of allegory for why migration across the world is a good thing is exactly what postmodernists tend to do when it comes to adapting older works. They will take things that people know, and then they will retrofit it to seem like it's something that it was never intended to be like in the first place. Ironically, Hollywood, and even video games do this as well, it's all very tiresome is what it is if you ask me. All Nolan did with the Odyssey was invert the morality of what the story meant, because he knows that he cannot offend nor challenge Hollywood at the ideals that they believe are to be true. Otherwise, he will be ostracized from the very institutions he believes gives legitimacy to his line of work. Which means objectively anything that gets made these days, especially in an Oscar-nominated sense, has to be to some degree adhering to the cultural zeitgeist, which doesn't help anyone if every movie, every director, actor, scriptwriter, if they all believe and act the same. Where's the individualism then? There isn't. The Odyssey as a story and what it stood for was always doomed from the start because of this, much like Odysseus' ill-fated crew in the story, because the gods, or Hollywood in this sense, want everything to exist and follow their laws and nothing else. In a sense, Nolan is like his own Odysseus, right? He's leading his crew home, but he was willing to sacrifice everything, including the point of the story, the ethnicity, and the cultural impact, all so that he can, hopefully, grasp another cold gold statue handed to him by people who smile with daggers in their pockets, that are just rewarding him for complying to their dogma. The whole thing feels disingenuous. If the only version of the Odyssey that we can have in a big Hollywood movie is what we got, I would rather not have it at all. Because if the only version that can exist, like this one that fundamentally forgets what the point of all of it even is, well then why bother? As Vanity Fair says here, they claim that social media is not real life, and this is why people who oppose the movie lost in a sense. But again, I think simply it did well for the same reason, because it's Nolan. People like his movies. That's all it is. Vanity Fair then, as seen here, spends entire paragraphs calling the campaign against the Odyssey as right-wing. and the film is a leftist celebration, but I think it's far more complicated than that. I think if anything, it proves that the general movie-going audience is swayed rather easily as long as you put enough dangling carrots in front of their faces. Like Hollywood actors they like. Look, it's Tom Holland, it's Zendaya, it's Robert Pattinson, and let's be real. When it comes to movies made by auteurs, there really isn't that many these days. The only other auteur movie I guess coming this year is what, Dune 3? Which will likely also make a lot of money as well, and also has Zendaya, again, God help me, but I think people are just starved for good movies. And they probably saw the spectacle and wanted to see it, right, be part of the conversation. I don't blame them for that, but a big box office doesn't mean a movie is amazing. Lots of bad movies do well at the box office, but using this one example of something Hollywood-backed doing well as some sort of gotcha is sort of rich, considering just how many other films have failed that have also done similar things. Yet likely what will happen is Hollywood and their propaganda sites will use the Odyssey win as some sort of blank check one-size-fits-all reasoning to say, look, it worked. Now we can go full-blown on more stuff like this, not realizing that, again, the only reason why this film did well was because of the names that were attached to it. And not every film that pushes these things is going to have Christopher Nolan directing or Robert Pattinson. We know that. So Hollywood thinking that they can chase this golden goose without the proper equipment or even the talent is going to go only one way, down the gutter with the rest of the failed projects. As Vanity Fair further says here, they think this is a big win against the usual people, but not really. It is an anomaly, if anything, that Hollywood will not be able to replicate for years, and I would bet money on that. I don't think celebrating one single win in a sea of destroyed ships is going to do anything, but I guess when you're so used to losing against the audience or people like Critical Drinker for well over 10 years and then some, any win is then equivalent to the top spot of the World Cup for these sorts of people. It's like someone who lost 200 grand on some card game, but when they win $20,000 in Las Vegas, they suddenly think they're back. Well, no, you still lost 180 grand in the long run. I mean, sure, that was a win for you, but you're still in the red. Vanity Fair, even as seen here, brings up Star Wars and how Disney's movies did well, but let's be real, did they? Force Awakens had all the goodwill in the world. It did over $2 billion. The Last Jedi did less and was controversial. And that points that Star Wars was on a downward turn, and Rise of Skywalker's box office, which yes, was still a bit over $1 billion and is not technically a flop, still, it made about half of what Last Jedi or Force Awakens made. So technically the film's conclusion did much worse, but even then by Star Wars standards, it's still a lot of money. But what happened after, right? Han Solo's movie flopped, as did Mando and Grogu's movie that practically nobody saw. Even the MCU has been failing for a long time now. The only reason this year will be a big win probably for Disney Marvel is because they're bringing us a Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland again and probably some X-Men characters in it. And Avengers Doomsday is going to make money, but will it do better than Infinity War or Endgame numbers? I'm not so sure, I gotta be real with you. Again, these sorts of problems are things that people like Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic point out in their videos. The exception cannot become the rule if you're looking at the Odyssey and thinking that this is how it's always going to be when it isn't. Way too many movies that push feminist ideals and then some have failed horribly over the years that disprove this. But what will likely happen is Hollywood will likely just usually learn the wrong lessons here, the same way the games industry doesn't learn anything valuable whenever a game does well too. Oh, that game sold well because it had a smaller budget and a more talented team? No, what we need is higher budgets. Bring in more contractors and more lead actors who hate our audiences, right? Emily Wilson was also interviewed by AF Post. And well, instead of me telling you what she thought, here's what she said. Hopefully this stays in the video and doesn't get copyrighted, so please watch this.
What did you think about the film in terms of this notion of the Odyssey as an anti-war text?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought I want to, not spoil anything about the film because I know the majority of people haven't seen the film. The film has these flashbacks to the Trojan War. I'm not sure if I see it as an entirely anti-war film, but it certainly presents us with an Odysseus who feels very bad about certain things that he's done in war and is struggling to process them in a very, I would say, very modern psychiatrized way. And he's struggling to process them and needs drugs to do so for help with his recovery.
Right.
And he seems to feel bad about being a warrior, and we never actually get to see him doing much warrioring, which I thought in a way was a bit of a shame. I mean, we do get to see the boat, which is lovely, but I think in some ways, I was realizing, thinking about the film, there's a tolerance for ambiguity in the world of the Odyssey, which I don't think there exactly is in the world of Hollywood blockbuster action films.
Right.
And I think that's one of the big challenges for Nolan, right?
Yeah.
Is that he has to make the protagonist a likable all-American hero.
Right.
Which is a real challenge if you're basing this on a poem where the hero is not necessarily motivated by romantic love or being a nice suburban parent, but actually he wants glory.
Right.
And he wants to get spoils from the sack of a city, which is, you'll see what Nolan does with all of that, but it's different things from what Homer does.
Right.
I kept looking in vain for a sense that this was a film about glory. I think it's a film that has some interest in shame, but I don't think it has any interest in glory.
I was going to ask you sort of if there were any scenes from the book that you wish had been in the movie, or tonalities, or if you had written the screenplay, are there moments you would have loved to include?
I mean, this is a very different adaptation from any that I would have done. So
Yeah.
I think but it is very much in tune with things that Nolan has been obsessed with his whole career.
Hopefully that clip's still in the video, but as you saw, Emily Wilson, who again is the person Nolan's movie is based on text-wise, flat out says she disagrees with his take there. This, in a sense, means that Emily Wilson is just as bad as a critical drinker, but she brings up good points nonetheless. That Nolan's version is not interested in glory, when Odysseus as a character is all about that actually. But for a feminist translator to sit there, watch your movie and go, wow, this is too feminist even for me, that's definitely a take. I mean, what Emily Wilson wanted Nolan to do was to make Odysseus into how she conveys him in her translation, which to her, Odysseus is a symbol of white supremacy. He's a white man who colonizes, destroys the lives of those around him. Whereas Nolan, more so, was far more interested in what if Odysseus was a man with views similar to that of a modern day leftist, but existed thousands of years ago. It then ends up creating something that doesn't make any sense. You essentially lose who Odysseus is, but you also lose who Nolan is trying to turn him into. It doesn't work, that's the point. They could have at least made it so that in Nolan's version, Odysseus is more so a right-wing man who awakens to be more liberal by the end. But to do that would require Hollywood to empathize or be told to root for a man whose belief system is everything they disagree with on a fundamental level. And that's why it doesn't work, because objectively Odysseus and the Greek warriors of Ithaca would not be raging leftists if they were real in this setting. They would unapologetically be pro-Greek and anti-anyone else because, especially during that time, if an invading force came to your lands, you had but one option to stop them, and it wasn't words. Instead, what Nolan has done with Odysseus is essentially take a character these Hollywood types would never have anything in common with and simply turn him into, well, one of them, because Hollywood's incapable of emphasizing with someone who doesn't think like they do. The Odyssey is about betrayal, war, love, and redemption, but I think Nolan doesn't care about any of that based on the movie that was made. It seems like to me that Hollywood is incapable of adapting a story these days on a big budget without changing what makes that story fundamentally great. So they just turn it into something they agree with, right? A great recent example of this is the animated version of Animal Farm. Originally, George Orwell's story was a sharp critique about communism and authoritarianism. Instead, the Animal Farm remake, done by the usual Hollywood types like Seth Rogen and more, abandons this message and completely changes its meaning and purpose to instead now be a critique of capitalism, because of course it is. For example, Napoleon, the pig in Animal Farm, is meant to be Orwell's depiction of Joseph Stalin, and how this pig, like Stalin, was manipulative and controlled everything around him through communism-like ideas, like in the book. Instead, Napoleon in this remake is essentially an allegory for the current sitting president of the United States, and basically, when it's all said and done, Animal Farm, the remake, ends up abandoning its original idea that communism is bad because Hollywood leftists love the idea of communism, so we can't have that. So instead of just making a new story or trying to tell the story they're adapting correctly, they would rather, much like Nolan's Odyssey, completely change the meaning of the literary works to fit their version instead. This is all done for a simple reason. It's to reclaim these stories and modernize them in hopes of replacing the original works to mean what the people behind the scenes want it to be like instead. This is why the Animal Farm remake is pointless, because it misses the point entirely. And this is why Emily Wilson even said that Nolan's version of the Odyssey missed the mark, because it's not Odysseus that you're watching. It's just some guy LARPing as someone named Odysseus, but at that point, why not tell a new story? Well, they could, but that would require not being able to lean heavily on an established franchise or name that people know for the movie or project to do well. And well, we can't have that, can we? So instead, we must force changes to the message, as the drinker would put it, because that's what these types do. And this is why the websites, even other content creators who adhere to and live by this dogma as if it's their new religion, will instead attack, misrepresent, and do anything in their power to belittle the integrity of importance of not just the works of the Odyssey, Animal Farm, and more, but they will extend that illegitimate criticism and blaming to the people that they want to see destroyed as well, alright? Like your critical drinkers, Nerdrotics, Disperus, Geeks and Gamers, Sydney Watsons, and many, many more. Because the existence of these sorts of channels and creators means that the powers that be do not have absolute control. As long as someone like a drinker exists, the narrative cannot be effectively transposed over anything that these types want 100%. Because there will be people who aren't a part of the media agenda that can speak out candidly and tell you what's actually happening with a movie or a show or a game, and this angers these types to no end. It's all about misleading you, ensuring that they can withhold information from you, so no wonder the Odyssey is being seen as a victory lap to Hollywood. It's a win because they think they can now use it to delegitimize the original text that it's based on, and the insufferably terminally online types will think that this somehow devalues or ruins the integrity of some YouTubers they don't like, when all it proves is that they successfully psyoped and gave money to something that thinks that they're morons either way. But a movie made to not resemble anything within it being praised is actually the greatest joke of all, because it shows that in the end, these types of people who champion replacement media like this, they have no ideals or thoughts of their own, and they only wish that they could get a fraction of what a drinker or Nerdrotic get on Daily View-wise as praise. The Odyssey has done nothing, honestly, but prove that the very same things ruining modern media are going to continue and will. And that tells me beyond anything else that the fight, well, it isn't over, but let me know what you think. Subscribe for more. Thanks for being here. I will say one thing at least, that pig scene is cool in the Odyssey visually, but besides that, nah, I'm good.